कुछ कहेंगे आप?
कल कहेंगे भैया,
लेकिन सर अभी
पार्लियामेंट को यूज करेंगे।
कल कुछ कहेंगे आप?
कल कहेंगे भैया,
लेकिन सर अभी
पार्लियामेंट को यूज करेंगे।
कुछ कहेंगे आप?
कल कहेंगे भैया,
लेकिन सर अभी
पार्लियामेंट को यूज करेंगे।
कल कुछ कहेंगे आप?
कल कहेंगे भैया,
लेकिन सर अभी
पार्लियामेंट को यूज करेंगे।
और मिस्टर आर जगन्नाथ, व्हाट डू यू मेक ऑफ दैट रिस्पांस? आज नहीं कल कहेंगे, कल भी पार्लियामेंट है।
Somebody has to prepare the response. No. So how is he going to say it otherwise? Huh? Anyway, so we are talking about infrastructure. I think the good that the emphasis is on infrastructure in all sides. It is necessitated because infrastructure improves the quality or the dynamics of the economy. It enables improvement in logistics and everything else. So that sustained there. But there is also compulsion for it. As long as private CapEx does not improve, the government has to be the driving force of investment in CapEx, and that is happening through the infrastructure. If you see even the changes in GRAMG, what are they? I mean, earlier you could just about an employment scheme. Today you don't really need a pure employment scheme, because you get free food, you get cash payouts by, say, it's all over the place. So in that case, using some of that money for infrastructure again makes a lot more sense. So it is like actually it's a good growth accelerator when, as long as private CapEx is not stepping up to the plate.
All right, and in fact, Tehseen respond to that, because the opposition repeatedly said that the entire Manrega scheme is being demolished, but actually the allocation has gone up from 86,000 to, I believe, 94,000, if I'm not wrong, in terms of the total allocation to the GRAMG scheme.
Yes, but we may talk about CapEx now 12.2 lakh crores, if I'm correct, or those numbers are right, to those numbers. But then what is the accountability for the infrastructure, and that infrastructure actually visibly seen and helping the people of India? Because repeatedly we've seen that the kind of infrastructure that India deserves and the kind of money that it's being spent, is that being accountable? I've been on your show multiple times on how the infrastructure has been mismanaged, misconstructed. I mean, in Mumbai we had a fall-way bridge that became a two-way flyover. We have a 90-degree bridge in Indore. Even in 2026 we have people dying of water contamination. So
not just the allocation, the way you spend it and the kind of manner in which it's implemented on ground is very important. I'm just interrupting you, I'm sorry, because Mr. N.K. Singh is joining us. He's a former chairman, he's in fact chairman of the 15th Finance Commission and president of the Institute of Economic Growth. Mr. N.K. Singh, your first response to this budget. Well, we've seen, of course, the huge emphasis as far as infrastructure spending is concerned. Not much in terms of the Aadmi. How would you rate this budget, Mr. N.K. Singh?
Well, I think that perhaps it is a misnomer that the Aadmi aspect has been ignored. If you look at the one defining fee differential between previous budgets and now, is that indeed the sectoral and the micro sectoral aspects have received significant emphasis in this budget. So this has been done without in any way compromising the overall macro picture, namely the path of fiscal consolidation, which we have adhered to, the fact that the fiscal deficit has come down to 4.5, which was a target, with a target of 4.3 for next year, with the debt to GDP having come down and being well on track to achieve the 50% debt to GDP by 2031. I'm sure that the rating agencies and investors would take favorable note of our adherence to the path of fiscal consolidation. At the same time, on account of the reform express, which has been outlined in this budget and in the actions of this government, it enables the potential growth rate to significantly go up from what it has historically been, 6.5% to 7%. This has been something which the economic survey has also outlined. So this budget must be seen in the context of the very detailed economic survey laid before us 2 days ago. Two other points and I will end here. First and foremost, look at the potential not only of the employment generation capability of the investment in infrastructure. Second, look at the multiple emphasis on areas like healthcare, the employment potential of healthcare, making India a tourist destination for health benefits for the elderly people and training people for the pharma sector. Then on tourism sector, you know that the highest capital employment coefficient, if it exists anywhere, it exists in the tourism sector. The emphasis which has been given in both these sectors on skilling, skill inculcation is a bridge between education and employment, and that this is really not an era of jobless growth, but this is an era where high growth rates are being combined with really advancing our employment potential. So in overall terms, this represents a more open India, an open India because of the fact that on account of these free trade agreements which were signed just 3 days ago, and if you look at the background, over the last 6 to 8 months we have signed such agreements with Australia, with UAE, with Qatar, suggesting an openness of an Indian economy which is reinforced by the recalibration of processes, procedures and rates for customs duty.
Yes. Mr. Singh, you know, this is a government like its predecessors which has been accused by India Inc. of tax terror. Do you think that today's announcements that have been made in relation to tax, particularly corporate tax, MAT, etc., would to some extent allay those fears?
Yes, I think in 3 ways. First of all, you and I know that it's not only the tax rate, it is the processes and procedures which are debilitating and which are the sources of leakages and which add to the travails of any investor. The fact that those are being minimized in multiple ways is a good signal. Second, I don't know if you noticed the fact that people in this country and abroad have talked of the Draconian Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, the old FERA, which you know. Now, some years ago, it was taken back to FEMA. We decriminalized the FERA by making the FEMA offences really civil offences, but the further deepening of the FEMA relaxations embedded in today's speech would be and should be an important indicator and a comfort to potential investors. Third, I think that the emphasizing of the center-state compact, the fact that many of these would be done in active cooperation and in concert with the states will comfort investors, because it's not only New Delhi that thinks in that way. It is Patna, Trivandrum, Lucknow, Tamil Nadu, Bangalore. If the processes and procedures are aligned in a manner which would inject investor confidence, it would be a very credible step.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for joining us. And we'll quickly take this across to our guests who are joining us as well here in the studio. Dr. Raghunathan, I want you to answer the question that Tehseen posed a short while earlier. He says it's not just important to spend on infrastructure, but the way you spend it. We've seen those spectacles on social media, bridges that narrow from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, bridges that are at right angles. And of course, it's not just infrastructure, it's not just roads and bridges, it's also basic things like drinking water. We've seen what's happened in Indore, and therefore the kind of reports that have then since started coming in from across the country. If we have to spend on infrastructure, we have to ensure that this is actually reaching the Aadmi of the country.
No, absolutely, Madhav, and thank you for having me here amongst experts. I speak as a layman. I want to put a couple of points across. It's a decent, nice budget given the limited maneuverability that is afforded to the finance minister every year. After all, it's a misnomer to see reform budget or something. We're not looking for dramatic reforms that obviously haven't materialized the kind of reforms that I wanted, farm reforms or privatization, whatever. Be that as it may, I think Tehseen poses a very fundamental question. But I like to turn it around a little bit, in a minute answer it. I think it's not a question of whether we are spending right or not. I think, Tehseen, it's a question of, are we borrowing right? You know, are we living on borrowed money? Is this all credit card? Now, let me explain what I mean. And that is the reason why, even though the debt to GDP ratio of the central government has reduced in the last 5 years from 60% to 55%, and the there's a 7% reduction in the total general debt to GDP ratio. I think it's 82% now. It was 89%. China's is, by the way, 104%. But the fact is, 5 years ago, the general government debt, Indian debt was 160 lakh crores. Today it is reaching its 296 lakh crores, about to cross 300 lakh crores. So are we spending it right after borrowing on infrastructure? Clearly we aren't. But are we also spending all that money on subsidies, on things, on running hotels that government should not, on making mixer grinders, on making scooters? In other words, are we using the money that we have borrowed productively? That may help us not only in the short run but in the long run as well. So debt to GDP ratio might give us a flawed picture. It might not tell us that, look, our debt, overall debt has almost doubled in the last 5 or 6 years. And is that good? That's not. So in America, when the overall debt is $35 trillion, people are, already saying emergencies out here. Right now, we are not concerned about what our overall debt is. And I think the two things must go hand in hand. It must give a reality check that even though debt to GDP ratio is decreased, our overall debt is something that we need to really look at.
Let me quickly introduce our guest from outside as well. Dr. Piyush Joshi, spokesperson of Aam Aadmi Party, is joining us. Professor Manojit Mandal, political analyst of TMC, is with us. But my first question is to Guru Prakash, national spokesperson of the BJP. Guru Prakash, debt to GDP ratio provides little in terms of the accurate picture, but that's what Dr. Ranganathan says. But I want you to answer this question, because there is a concern being expressed that our targets of privatization, of disinvestment that we announced several years ago haven't quite materialized, and this budget does not come out and articulate that vision any further either. Guru Prakash.
No, fiscal responsibility, Madhav, we have to understand that has been our topmost priority, not only since Prime Minister Modi, but since Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji. We all remember Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act came into existence when Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji was the Prime Minister. Fiscal deficit has always been under control, and I think our priority is this. Fiscal economy, discipline, our government spending, even if you can argue on the populist scheme as well, but we have always ensured that every single money that is spent from taxpayers' account is delivered very well within the promises. I think the Congress government, on the other hand, has made promises, tall promises, and did not do the delivery. But the Bharatiya Janata Party, our culture and our strategy is such that we make sure that accountability is ensured. But I would like to respond to what my friend Tehseen said on infrastructure. I come from Bihar, Madhav, and I was really disturbed by his observation on infrastructure. I live in Patna. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, from Patna to go to any remote corner of Bihar, it was a journey of 48 hours. Road, boats, and God know what. But today, from any part of Bihar to Patna, you can come in the same day. Patna to Kishanganj, Kishanganj to Patna. Patna to Darbhanga, Darbhanga to Patna. Patna to Bhagalpur, Bhagalpur to Patna. So infrastructure spending cannot be discounted. And it has an impact across the segment. It has an impact on farm producers, it has an impact on students, it has an impact on middle class people, it has an impact on the normal job seekers as well. So we have to understand, you cannot discount. I'm sure there are a couple of incidents. The incidents in Indore, the incidents of bridges, we have falling bridges in West Bengal as well. But the point is not politics. Infrastructure spending, fiscal responsibility has to be the priority. And this
infrastructure spending has transformed life. He says, in my state, I've seen it on ground. Respond to that, Rohit Azad. Is this should this not be a priority? Because if you have to have economic activity, we cannot have, infrastructure from the last century.
Incidentally, I'm also from Patna. So I don't think there's anything wrong with CapEx per se. Infrastructure spending is very important. But it is also true that this kind of spending has not generated enough jobs in the economy. That is also true. So to pit one against the other is where I have a problem. If you were to actually spend along with this also generating jobs, because one has to answer, why is it the case that the corporate sector the factories in the corporate sector are running with excess capacity? There is an issue which needs to be addressed. CapEx is not delivering fully. That is not to say you remove CapEx. I don't think that's the solution. But you need to think of non-CapEx as well, especially which are employment intensive.
So this 2047 data center tax holiday that's been announced, don't you think moves like that will help in employment? One by one. Yeah. The question is for you.
Sorry.
what has been announced just now, as far as data centers, 2047, there will be a tax holiday, so on and so forth. Will that not help generate employment in your view?
So two things on that. First of all, the data hub necessarily, how many jobs does it generate? We all know it's a very capital intensive investment. There's nothing wrong with it, by the way. That's not the point I'm trying to make at all. At the same time, you have to think in terms of how AI is going to affect jobs in this economy. Data hubs are not going to substitute for that. Okay, that's an important thing. And thinking about, you know, giving tax rebate alone does not produce investment.
Tax rebate alone will not produce the kind of results. But there was an AI announcement also, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a great question and discussion posed by my good friend Rohit here. Let me answer it within less than a minute. Yes, the investment that the government is making is good, you say. Where is the private sector making the investment? Are bhai, you are making the private sector fight Muhammad Ali with one hand tied. Where are the reforms?
All right. And Rahul Gandhi has just tweeted talking about the lack of manufacturing jobs, etc. Youth without jobs, falling manufacturing, investors pulling out capital, household savings plummeting, farmers in distress, looming global shocks, all ignored. But
he'll use the platform of the parliament tomorrow to speak about. Even he did not prefer to give an initial response to the media. What do you have to say?
I think that one has to very intently listen to the budget pronouncement to give an immediate response to it. One expects not a very productive response, not a very pragmatic response, not a very responsible response, but a response which will be a critique based on lack of evidence, a critique based just for the sake of criticism. That is an expected position from the Congress party.
He has also tweeted that youth without job, failing infrastructure, investors pulling out, nothing has been done.
If the budget announcements and the budget speech of the finance minister were listened to, possibly the announcements that he missed would have at least helped him tweet more positively and more productively.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
The response of Smriti Irani, and let's quickly get in some of our other panelists as well. Dr. Piyush Joshi, spokesperson of Aadmi Party, are you in agreement with the Congress party when they say that this is an economy where there's no manufacturing happening, there are no jobs? Rahul Gandhi, of course, saying that it's falling manufacturing, investors pulling out of capital. The government, for its part, says that this is aimed at 2047 for building strong infrastructure, industry and the economy.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Madhav. Anand mentioned one layman's perspective. Let me explain another layman's perspective. When I look at it from the perspective of my own party, that is the Aadmi Party, I look at two sectors first. One is healthcare, another is education. What am I getting in healthcare? I'm getting 3 Ayush aims, number one. Number two, what am I getting in healthcare? A big push for biopharma. I was hearing very intently the Honorable Prime Minister's speech when he said that the healthcare investment is going to generate jobs. When you talk about biopharma, I'm a doctor, I understand a lot of this industry is basically automation based. So very limited jobs are going to be provided in the biopharma sector, if at all, it contributes to the significant sum that the finance minister has allocated to this sector.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you there for a moment. We have Rajiv Memani, President of CII, joining us at the moment. Mr. Memani, thank you so much for speaking to Times Now. Your first reaction to this budget, what is the big takeaway according to you?
I think the big takeaway, one is there is a continuity which leads to more stability. There is a focus on manufacturing, which we've seen through, particularly in the 7 sectors that they've identified. I would like to highlight electronics manufacturing over here, semiconductors, and also some of the labor-intensive sectors that they've looked at. On the infrastructure, while the spend as a percentage of GDP is the same, but overall if you add the transfer amount to states, which are the long-term loans that states get, the increase is almost 20%. So I think infrastructure spend and also the relief that is being given to MSMEs, that's also positive. I think whether it's the equity growth capital support or the support on the credit side, I think that will enable manufacturing in a very significant way. And in the emerging sectors, in nuclear, for example, there is a zero customs duty for imports. On the technology, on global capability centers, whilst they're doing very well, they had issues around APAs and transfer pricing. I think that they've introduced the safe harbor, or they've raised the caps of the safe harbor. I think that's very positive. On data centers, I think it's been the tax relief that has been provided for exports is almost for next 22 years. So I think government is sending out a very clear signal to global investors to look at investing in data centers in India. And on the tax side, whilst no specific relief, significant relief has been provided, but a lot of focus has been on simplification and those areas of concerns which were there for, whether it's in terms of TDS, TCS, some safe harbor rules, something to promote and push electronics manufacturing, or the issues that investors were facing. I think they've been focused there. So you would say that, in an environment where tax revenues have not been that buoyant, keeping fiscal consolidation in mind and ensuring that you are allocating expenditure much more towards CapEx spend, towards defense and other areas, and rationalizing the other areas and spending there, I think that's been the highlight of the budget. Fiscal discipline is very important, and I think that the government has maintained, especially in the current
One of the observations from several of our studio panelists has been this, that while the government spending on CapEx has been high, private sector spending on CapEx has been limited. And secondly, this kind of infrastructure spending has not resulted in the kind of employment numbers that would have ideally liked it to translate into. What do you attribute this to?
So I think 2-3 things. One is, if I look at private capex, I know a lot of people are been talking about it, but if you look at data till 25 on private capex for listed companies or top 5,000 companies went up by 20%. So I don't know why people keep on commenting that private capex is not happening. In the first half of 26, it became slow because of all the issues, global issues that were happening around tariff. We also must understand what's happening in China. There is massive overcapacity there. There is global uncertainty. So I think it took a pause. But in the last 6 months, if you look at the number of new projects announced, the capex commitments that have been made is significant. Capacity utilizations have also gone up. So I have no doubt it slowed down in 23, it picked momentum in 24, it was firing on 25, slowed down early 26, it's picking up momentum again. So I have no doubt that private capex is going to go up. And if you look at the top 10, top 15 companies in India and look at their balance sheets, all of them are committing much more capital than they've ever done. Capex than they've ever done, and all these things have a trickle-down effect, and that's why the relief that's been provided also to MSMEs, whether it's in terms of private equity support, whether it's in terms of borrowing through trades, I think that gives MSME the strength also to increase their capacity as the larger companies start spending more and more. So I don't particularly buy the argument that private capex data doesn't bear that out.
Thank you so much, Mr. Memani, for joining us. So let me bring in Professor Manojit Mandal. Professor Manojit Mandal, when we saw the last budget that was announced and the huge amount of announcements, particularly as far as Bihar was concerned, the accusation is that centre is making announcements specifically to poll-bound states. Now that this particular budget has come out, now we have Mamata Banerjee saying there's nothing for Bengal. So the BJP and the centre will come out and say you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't in this country. Your response to that?
I mean, forget about anything for the poll-bound states. What this budget has got to do with the common people. Not just common people. Think about the farmers, the middle class, even the corporates. Look at the response from the share market. It crashed like anything. The share market has crashed, Sensex 1,000 points down. Look at this. I mean, we don't have to say anything. The people of this country, irrespective of their class, starting from the farmers to the corporate, they are saying it all. This budget has got nothing for anyone. 30 crore people are going to vote in the next 2-3 months in these 5 states. Anything for them? You don't even take the name of any of the states, including Bengal. Nothing for Bengal, nothing for Assam, nothing for Tamil Nadu, nothing for Kerala, nothing for Puducherry. And
that's
you had
exactly the point I was making a short while earlier. But Dr. Nathan, damned if you do, damned if you don't is what BJP is saying.
Yeah.
How do you respond to Professor Mandal?
And I've never seen Professor Mandal, saying everything is going right that the Modi government is doing, when in the last 10 years the stock market BSE Sensex has increased from 50,000 to 86,000. But be that as it may, I don't want this discussion to be political. It was magnificently learning experience for me what Rohit said, and I want to expand on that just 30 seconds. How will private investment increase? It will increase when you undertake reforms. It will increase when the government realizes that the role of the government is not to run the economy. The role of the government is to make its people run the economy. Why is the government running hotels? Why is the government running airlines, mixer grinders, scooters, calculators? Why? Where is the flexibility in our workforce when 44% of our active labor force of 600 million Indians is involved in agriculture, a sector that contributes only 13.5 to 14% of the GDP? All those people have to be flexible enough, adaptable enough to go. Look at Western countries where you had one sector collapse and the workforce immediately go into another sector. That is why you need adaptability, flexibility, skilling. You need a lot of things that the government can encourage. But here the government is running the economy. This is the problem why the private sector is not able to contribute.
All right, Professor Mandal wants to respond to you. One second, just one by one. Professor Mandal. And Piyush Joshi's hand also going up. Professor Mandal first.
I have got nothing to comment on my good friend's Ranganathan's state. We know what he will speak about. We know how he defends the government. But people are saying, I mean, it's even subsidy. You have reduced the subsidy on fertilizer for 4 common people. How could you do that?
But be fair, he's actually criticizing the government for not getting out of, he's saying let the corporates and private sector actually participate. He's actually criticizing the government.
Which classes of people are benefiting from this budget?
All right, let's cut across live. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman speaking, cutting across live to that press conference. So that's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman.